other committees and boards that need to be called to order? Pelham.
I call the Pelham Finance Committee to order.
Anybody else in Pelham? Perfect. Shutesbury.
I'll call the Shrewsbury Select Board to order.
Excellent. Leverett.
Call Leverett Select Board to order.
And call the Finance Committee to order.
Excellent.
On switch.
What?
Is the switch on?
Yes. Amherst.
We don't have a quorum yet.
Oh, okay. Well, as soon as you do, give me the high five. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming. This today is going to be, this is a very early draft budget. As we all know, there are so many factors that are not yet confirmed. However, we did have a great conversation earlier in the fall, and I wanted to be able to continue to have a collaborative process. So that is where we're going to start. Were there any, I think there were a few announcements people needed to make. Yes, there we go.
Hi, I'm Susie Mosier from the Shutesbury Finance Committee, and we have initiated a postcard lobbying effort to send it in to the governor before she finishes her draft. There's two sides, you have to put your name and address and email on the back, and there's some check boxes. Insufficient state support for rural schools impacts me by limiting local learning opportunities and reducing access to programs, making it harder to afford staying in my home and community, and straining other town services and employee retention. So if you could fill out one of these, I'll put them in you can put them in the bag over there. It's over by the donuts, I think. And I'll mail them en masse to the governor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, were there any other? No, excellent. Okay, so our first agenda item is identification of the 4 town representatives for collaboration with the Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee, which was part of what we talked about at our last 4 towns meeting. The Regional School Committee has a Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee that has been doing a lot of research and advocacy. And part of that conversation at our last 4 towns meeting was there was also a 4 towns working group. And for those two to come together to be able to continue to work collaboratively. We had asked that each town put forth a representative to work with the Fiscal Sustainability Group. And do the towns have a representative? Mandy Jo.
So I'll start. I was elected president on Monday. We just reorganized on Monday for the town council, so we have not yet. We will be doing so on this coming Monday at our next council meeting, but I was hoping to request, given the interest that our councilors have in potentially serving on this group, that the towns consider the possibility that at least Amherst, but we're open to all the towns being willing to nominate 2 representatives to this, and the school committee to consider whether that's a possibility that we could nominate 2 or all towns could nominate 2. And we just got our quorum, so we're calling the council meeting to order.
Excellent, thank you.
Pelham nominates our chair of the Finance Committee, John Trickey.
Thank you. Did Leverett or Shutesbury have an opportunity to, still on? Just did Leverett or Shutesbury have an opportunity to, yep.
We nominate Steve Field as our representative. Weiss, excuse me. The other one, the other Steve. Sorry. As our representative, he's from the Finance Committee.
Which town?
Leverett.
Thank you. Shutesbury?
Shutesbury will nominate A.J. Cashew.
Perfect. Excellent, thank you. Deb is chair of our fiscal sustainability subcommittee, so if we will coordinate and move forward. Excellent, thank you all. Okay. So next is our rough draft of our FY27 budget. Shannon.
Good morning. For those that don't know, I'm Shannon Vernaccia, the Director of Finance here at the Regional School District. I am going to walk us through the PowerPoint. Some slides will be a little quicker in interest of time. So we're just going to dive right in. If I know how to change it. Oh, there we go. So a general overview, we're going to start off, actually Dr. Z will start off talking a little bit about what's required by law for our educational programs at the school. And then I'll talk a little bit about our operating budget, the revenue budget. We'll move into capital. I heard at one of the town's meetings that you wanted to know a little bit more about our revolving funds and stabilization, so I've included that in this presentation. And then also at the request of a school committee member, we're gonna just have a brief information about school choice, charter, and VOC and what those costs are. Then we'll take some clarifying questions. And in the end of the PowerPoint, I won't be presenting, but it has the information for enrollment by town, so you had that at your fingertips. So with that, I will pass this beginning piece off to Dr. Z. Yep.
All right, so you can keep that one. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I think that in one of our budget and audit subcommittee meetings, the chair of that subcommittee said it would be really great if we could present what is required versus what is kind of like optional. And so we created a document, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, that outlines the various laws, Massachusetts general law, as well as DESE regulations, even some federal state laws that outline what is required. I think a lot of times when the budgets come forward, everyone thinks that it's easier to make a decision around the academic programming because you can save special education teachers, but get rid of core teachers. Well, the special education program is intended by law to ensure that students who have various needs are able to take part and learn with their peers. Right? So there's terminology, least restrictive environment, FAPE. All of that talks about the educational programming. By law, we're required to have a special education program. By law, we're required to have human resources, or it doesn't say how things show up. By law, we're supposed to be able to manage our funds appropriately. By law, we're supposed to have a school committee. We're supposed to have a superintendent. It outlines a principal. It doesn't outline assistant principals, but you know that depending on school populations, you need assistant principals, you need deans to run your school. So we wanted to create a picture for you that's not just about numbers, but also why we do what we do and what things we are required to do. So there's also a glossary in here that talks about what we must provide, what we must ensure access to, and what we should provide. Because some things we have to provide access to, which means that it doesn't mean that we have to do it. For example, transportation. We have to ensure that children are transported or have access to transportation, but it doesn't mean that the school district has to have the buses. It means that we can contract out. So it's a very relevant document when you start to ask your questions and when we start to dig into the conversations around the reductions and FTEs, because it frames in your mind when we are saying that we can and can't cut certain things, the whys around it, the what we are pushed to do. And I would rather us be in full compliance and create the educational program for our children that we are required to do. I would also want us to start to think about programming that we can do. But I know that with our current budget situation, let's at least talk about what we have to provide, what we have to ensure access to, and what we should be providing in this budget.
So I'm going to go over the draft operating budget. With this budget, we have already applied $850,000 of school choice into the salary lines. We've accounted for our OPEB funding. I don't know if you remember from last year, we weren't following the schedule that was originally voted. So we took the amount that we were off, divided by 2, did half last year, and then the remaining half is this year. So now we'll be going forward following that schedule. We're assuming right now an 18% health insurance increase. I'm hopeful that we'll know more end of January, beginning of February, but at this time, that's our assumption. We're in year 2 for FY27 of our transportation contract with Kosmeskis. There's some things about the track maintenance that I'll talk about when we get to the next slide. We've made assumptions for where the APA contract will land. It's not yet ratified. And then in FY27, we'll start negotiating the AFSCME contract for the following year. So I know this slide's really hard to see, so I'm hopeful that you had some chance last night to review this slide. Our salaries, we have projected at a 6.8% increase, and this accounts for steps and COLAs, but right now it does not account for any shared staff that may be at the region right now, but be assisting with teaching the 6th grade when they come into the middle school. So those reductions of split staff is not yet projected in here, as we're still working on that. Our contracts, we had some increase to our tutor line and increase for our athletic trainer per their contract. For subs, I have a 3-year increase. We've noticed a big increase in our substitute lines, so I've done a 3-year increase to account for that for FY20, or 3-year average to account for that for FY27. In some of our expense accounts that are non-payroll, we have possibly 3 potential residential placements for the region and other out-of-district placements. So residential placements could cost anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 for the year. Out-of-district placements that are not residential cost a little bit less. The interesting thing here is that our transportation costs for those out-of-district placements are just about the same as the placement for the program. The transportation costs are absolutely outrageous, but we have to account for those as it's a required service that we have to provide. So you'll see an increase in the special education line for that. We have applied IDA funding, which is a federal grant that we receive every year to help offset some of that, and also circuit breaker to those lines, which helps not having as dramatic increase. But right now we're having an increase of 13% in that area. In other programs, we have an increase to our choice assessment and to our vocational assessment for our vocational tuition. We have an influx of 9th graders who have gone out to vocational schools for FY26. So we'll monitor that and see if they come back, because sometimes that does happen for 9th graders. The charter assessment I have not yet updated on here. I'm waiting to see when the state budget comes out, and also the Q2 report from DESE with the actual placements for FY26. So that has not been updated, but I do project an increase, but not sure yet, so I didn't put the number in. For student services, we have a little bit of an increase there. That's specific actually to a student, so I won't talk about that. In our program and staff development, we have some increases for our printers and some decreases in supplies and contracted services and PD that we've already taken out, and a slight increase in some resource materials that we'll need, but overall it has a net decrease. It's a little amount, but we're going to account for it for about $2,500. In school administration, we have we've had to do some increases for our printer and copier contract. You'll see that in some of the various lines because it affects all different departments, so we charge that department. In central administration, you'll see an increase of $146,000 here, and that is due to some of our legal fees for student and staff issues. I did a 3-year average of what those costs are. We did decrease our advertising notices. We have an increase in our HWare software for some of the new practices that we have put into place. The business office has also seen an increase for our accounting software with Munis, and our Unibank financial advisory fee, and because we are going out for some new RFPs, we've increased some of our legal ads, and of course the printer contract. So when we get at some point to the line by line, that's what those costs are. In IS, we have a reduction in some of our tech leases and an increase in some of our software licenses, but again, it nets into a decrease of $15,300. Our utilities, we've aligned closer with our actuals. There was a slight decrease in our gas, but we did increase water given the fields for the new track and field. I don't know how much that's going to cost yet, so we did project an increase. We do have capital funding for our well, which we do plan on pursuing soon after the track is done, but we'll need to wait until the weather is nicer and the ground is not frozen. For facilities, there's a big increase here, and there's two reasons for that. One of that is we have an unfilled HVAC position and unfilled plumber position that we haven't been able to hire somebody for. So we have decided to take those positions out of the payroll and put it into the contracted services line within facilities, because that's what's actually happening. And when we do our quarterly reports, you always see that that's over budget, and it is offset by those payroll lines. So we're moving that down, although we might actually have a hire for our HVAC position, so that might be changed at the next round of this. So that is some good news and would help us not contract out for those services. The other big increase in here is for the track maintenance. So we had looked at what other maintenance of tracks costs. I think Bob Perrin at the town of Amherst had received some estimates, and we have $120,000 in here for that, but after speaking with Paul and Sean at the town of Amherst, they have said that it's possible they may cover those costs for a year or two, and then we slowly build it into the budget. It's not finalized, but it is something that we did talk about. And if we were able to take that out, that's a $120,000 savings for this year, which would be helpful. In our transportation, we right now we're in year 2 of our contract, and we do have unfilled driver vacancies, and this year right now we're not able to do the Voc transportation, so I don't see that changing right now, so I'm projecting contracting that out for 27, so that is also part of the increase in our transportation. For our risk and benefits, like I said, we have the health insurance increase of 18%. We have an increase for our liability insurance, and increase for unemployment. In our control accounts, it looks like there's a massive increase, but last year we had rural school aid to support the budget, which made that line lower. I have not put rural school aid in this budget yet. I want to see what the state is saying before we do so, and if you remember, $250,000 is what we estimated based on what we have been receiving, but in FY26 we were only given $190,000 and not the full $250,000. So I want to be really cautious with that. So we'll see what the state is saying when the time comes. Moving forward, this slide I just wrote down some of the things I was going to say so that you had it if you weren't able to jot everything down. Our revenue slide, I should say that operating budget that I showed is level services with no reductions taken into account. So this revenue slide that you see here is for level services of an operating budget of $40,600,000 and change, which is an increase of 9.51%. I have made an adjustment and an increase for Chapter 30. We'll see what the state is saying, but right now we just have $30 per student as the increase. A slight increase to our transportation because our contracted out for transportation is costing more, so we will see an increase in that. So I've accounted for a small increase there. Our Medicaid reimbursement has been really steady over the last few years, so I'm not changing that. At least not right now. Our charter reimbursement is the same, but this will change. I need to see the Q2 reports from DESE. They don't release Q1 because it's preliminary estimates. Q2 will have actual information on there, and hopefully that's out by the end of January before I make any adjustments to the charter. Our interest revenue, we have a big increase here considering the amount of interest revenue we're receiving. We want to make sure we account for that so that it can support the FY27 budget. So we have a $280,000 increase to that. We have not in the past put homeless care and foster care transportation reimbursement on here. That's new. I think it started in, maybe 2019. So I looked at what we have been receiving over the few years, and normally this amount, it rolls into the E&D. It is a small amount, and we have been consistently receiving it, so I'm adding it onto our revenue sheet going forward. And then we have an increase for our E&D, given where that level is, to support the operating budget, and then the $280,000 for contingency. So down at the bottom of the sheet, if we were to fund a budget with level services, I have the percentages broken down for each town of what that increase is, and then what the total dollar amount changes. Because we had, at the time E&D was certified and we were over by 5%, it was a total of $151,000. We had the option to either alter the FY26 budget to reduce the assessments for 26, or to use it in the 27 to reduce the assessments for 27. So after a vote by the school committee and my recommendation to use it in 27, that is what has been voted, and so whatever the assessments end up being for Amherst, Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury, it would be reduced for Amherst $120,000, Pelham $8,000, Leverett $11,000, and Shutesbury $12,000. But the base for each of the towns for the following year will be what was voted, but you won't be paying that full amount in FY27 because of the E&D excess. So on this slide, with a draft operating level services budget of $40.6 million, we've outlined what level of reduction that we took. So if we had an $800,000 reduction, what does that mean for each of the towns? What does the percent increase look like? What's the dollar amount? And then the actual total. So I won't go over this line by line, but we wanted to make sure that you had these scenarios laid out based on our reductions. The last one, these are in $400,000 increments. The last one of $2.06 million, we added based on the Amherst guidance of 3.5%. I know it's not exactly 3, it's 3.52. I could have played around with more numbers, but I just made it simple for this. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about our operating budget as a whole. So 52% of it is salaries, and the remaining are expenses. And then on the bar graph chart for the district, the middle school, and the high school, you can see majority for the high school and the middle school is salaries, and then majority of expenses for the district is our expenses, which are like our transportation, our health insurance, those types of costs. And I kind of outlined that on the side as well. So our composition of staff, this is a request that school committee had, is how many teachers, paras do we have at each of the schools? So on the right-hand side, you'll see the bar graph that breaks it down by high school, middle school, and central office for approximate how many staff are in each of these. And then most of our staffing is teachers at 56%, followed by paras at 28%. So this was just some good information that we wanted to provide to you. Some of our unavoidable costs. So on the 2 slides back, most of the district costs are expenses, not salaries. And this accounts for our health insurance, our charter tuition assessment, the choice assessment, our transportation, utilities, etc. And these are just some of them. I only pulled out some of the bigger ticket items, but this accounts for 36% of the budget, and that's not something that we can change, unfortunately, although we would like to. These are costs that we have to account for regardless of what reductions we need to make. So in perspective, if we had an average salary of $70,000 and we had an $800,000 reduction, it's equivalent to 11.43 FTEs. If we had a $2 million reduction at an average salary of $70,000, it's equivalent to 28.57 FTEs.
Quick, salary, what about the benefit of the insurance and retirement reduction that would go along with the reduction?
So that's a good point. For this scenario, we just kind of wanted to get in perspective of what we're looking at. We'd really, so health insurance costs can vary from person depending on what their plan is. So a PPO plan is much more expensive than an HMO plan. So I guess we could make an average and an estimate and also show that, but this was really just to give you some FTE idea, but not going too deep in the weeds at this point. Just an overview. So with that, I will talk a little bit about our capital projects for FY27. We want to continue with our ADA work. There's always things that come up, so we're asking for $40,000 to continue to support that. I don't believe we have any more ADA funds available. In our high school, in some of our suites, the air handler and the temperature control needs to be replaced, and we would like to do that this upcoming year, and that's approximately $80,000. It's a high priority for us. We already did have some funds for the girls' locker room renovation, but we need additional funds to complete the study, and so we're asking for $10,000 additional to do that and include the adult bathroom that's there, because that's often used and it's in poor shape, and we'd like to make it nice so when parents and staff and students, whoever uses that bathroom when games are going on, it's a little bit nicer. We also want to replace the domestic hot water heaters at the high school. The units are over 20 years old and they're approaching end of life, so we don't want to wait till the last minute to when, if something happens during the year and we don't have the funding for that. There is a roof repair at the high school that one of our staff members can do with shingling. I believe it was above the English wing. So one of our staff members can do that work, but we need to be able to purchase the materials for that. At the middle school, we have to do the electrical service update. So the main breaker is original to the building, and the company is no longer in business. So for us to get replacement parts, it's very difficult, and that does need to be replaced. So we're asking for $235,000 for that. That is the biggest ticket item on here. The wood shop door, that needs to be replaced. It's not a high priority, medium priority, but it needs to be secure, and doors are actually expensive. I don't know if anybody's looked at doors for your house, but they are. And then our middle school elevator, we need to do an oil change, and those are also expensive. It's about $10,000 for that oil change, and we're learning that with the repair of the high school elevator, which will be repaired starting next week. So that is some good news. So the total capital FY27 project request is for $497,000. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our Director of Operations, Mike Gallo, because we have been working really hard on our capital plan, looking at funding from previous projects and really getting together a timeline. So I'm really happy where we are this year and our teamwork on that, and to really getting these projects done. So our capital debt assessment. So I know this is super small. At the request of one of our school committee members who helped join some of our capital planning discussions, she had asked to separate the middle school roof and the track and field debt, because those were two major projects that the community and the school committee really supported, and I didn't want to roll it in with the other debt. So those are separated out, which is, I think the roof was always separated out, but the track and field wasn't. So that's done so on this document. And then in the projected FY21 to 26, that are the other projects that are not the roof or the track and field. For 27, the total debt assessment for the towns, which is a dramatic increase from last year, but this has to do with the middle school roof, is $944,000. So it's $761,000 from Amherst, $31,000 from, $29,000, I was looking at the wrong column, for Pelham, Leverett 86,000 and Shutesbury 67,000. You'll notice that Pelham does not have a big increase like the other towns from 26 to 27, and that's because of the roof, since they're not participating in district borrowing, pending your approval of those votes that are coming up. I have taken that out of here and accounted for that already, but if something changes, I will certainly change it. Then I know last year, I think Mandy Jo, you had asked me, well, what are the projects for those out years? We'd like to see what they are. So this is, I apologize for the highlights on this sheet. They do mean something when we're working on them, and I didn't want to take the highlights off. But this has, I won't go through it, the more detail of what these projects are that make up the possible out-year debt assessments. So, and they're subject to change every year. It's not finalized, but this was revamped and updated with myself and operations, and we had a school committee member join us as well. Moving right along, our revolving funds. So there were some questions about what funds do we have in revolving, what are they, how do we use them. So food service revolving is one of those which fully funds all of our operations for food services. There is nothing on our operating budget for food services, which is great. It's self-funding. We get all of the money from the state, and it's stable. Our special education tuition, we do have a revolving fund for that, and we take in money for placements for Summit and PIP. It's majority of Summit students that tuition in, and we have some teaching staff and para staff that are funded from that revolving account at Summit. Then we also have our school choice. So we have students that choice into the district, and we receive $5,000 per student, but you'll notice our school choice money is a lot higher and won't ever be exact to, okay, we have 10 students times 5,000 students, so it's X amount of dollars. We also get reimbursed for however much spending we have on special education. So it won't ever match 5,000 per student when you see those actual amounts. And we use that to support our operating budget year over year. And like I said before, $850,000 of that is already accounted for in our operating budget. And so what we do is we take a salary line that supports, you know, something that's overall, like, I don't know, the math department. Because everybody has to take math, and we've reduced that account line by X amount of dollars. So that's how we account for it. Our athletics is, it has a revolving fund, and we receive participation fees to participate in the sports and gate receipts that support that fund. We had a little bit of a hiccup at the end of 25 with some of the athletics revolving funds, and we had to move some of that onto the operating budget. I will report we are now using electronic payments for athletics, and that has been super helpful with our collections, and the athletics department has done an amazing job following up with families, and I think I did an internal report, our collections at October from this year to last year. It was an insane percentage. It was like almost a 200% increase in gate receipts, and I think like 60% increase in participation fees that we had already collected in comparison to the prior year. So they're really doing a good job, and I'm going to do a more thorough look to see how we balance out some of the costs that we did put on the operating budget for athletics this year and what we might do for next year. That's still in the works, so I'll keep you posted if I make any changes that affect the operating budget, and then the school committee, when you receive the actual line by line, you'll see the revolving fund information in there for athletics. Circuit breaker is another fund. So anytime we have a special education student that meets the certain threshold for the state that says, okay, if you are over, just a made up number, $100,000 for this student, and it's much more than that, then we will reimburse you anything over that at a certain percentage. So this past year, it was 75% and 61% for the transportation costs related to that student. So we use that to support the operating budget. If you remember when I was talking about special education, we had already accounted for IDA funds and circuit breaker. We have this fund set up in a really great way where we claim the money in one year, we receive that reimbursement the following year, and then we use it the year after that. So every year we know the exact dollar amount to budget, and there's no guessing. I wanted to just give you an idea of kind of what the costs are for the choice assessment over the last few years. So in 25, we've had a high amount for students choicing out compared to the prior years, and then I put what schools that they go to. So most of our students, when they choice out, they go to Hadley, and I think that's key information to know if we are doing further research on that. Students that choice into the district and the revenue that we receive, I did the same, the bar graph for the amounts, the actual amounts that the district has received. And many of our students that choice in come from Belchertown. And then I would say South Hadley is maybe the second one where students come in from. Charter, I have placed, in the blue columns are the revenue for charter, and the orange columns are the actual expenses. So in FY25, 88 students were in charter. Most of those students were going to the Chinese immersion school. Like I said before, I won't know. I'm really waiting for the Q2 rosters from DESE before I dig into charter more. And like I said, yeah, most of the 65% of the students that did go to a charter school, it was the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion School, and behind that was the Pioneer Valley Performing Arts School. Since we were talking about school choice and charter, we have to include vocational because that's another program that we do pay for students when they go to Franklin Tech and Smith. So you'll see what it has cost throughout the years, and that seems pretty steady. For FY26, we have 29 students going to Smith and 7 that are going to Franklin Tech. Stabilization. So we do have a special education stabilization fund. Every year we do budget an amount within special ed that it's called transfer reserve. And if at the end of the year we're able to, we can then move funds into the stabilization fund, which is not something that has been done over the last few years, but at the end of 25, I was able to move, I think it was 42,000, I think, if I remember correctly, into this fund. If we want to use this fund, school committee has to vote in order to do so. And I actually believe when I was looking on the DESE website that it also must be approved by 4 towns if we do want to use this line. So in this case, if we had an unexpected residential placement or students move in, things that we didn't expect that are related to special education, we could access these funds during the year. But it's not something that we would necessarily consistently use every year. If we had one residential placement, that could wipe out almost the entire amount. And then for the next year, we would be able to plan that placement on the operating budget. We also have a capital stabilization fund, and transfers similar to special education. Anything going in or out of that fund, well, actually not going in, but actually coming out of that fund, school committee has to vote. So revenue from, interest revenue from our borrowing with cash on hand in our bank account, the money that's actually in our bank account, that goes into the capital stabilization fund. And sometimes we use this to pay immediate interest payments that require cash on hand, which does go before the school committee. Something's coming up, I will tell you that. And we could also use the capital stabilization if there was an urgent repair that was needed during the year. We could access those funds, and school committee would have to vote. So that was kind of most of the presentation, and I will take clarifying questions. We have a second mic if we want to distribute that around.
Thank you. Clarifying questions. Oh, that's great. Sorry.
Phil Carter, Leverett Finance Committee. I have several questions, actually. Is that all right? First of all, you said you're applying at $850,000 of school choice funds. Where does that show up on the revenue slide?
So it's not actually a revenue that we would show on there. Maybe I shouldn't call it revenue, it's more of reimbursement. So we apply it to the salary line directly. So the operating budget is already reduced by that amount.
And then, in the revenue budget, the slide, you're spending, I'm adding correctly, something like $1.2 million from the E&D account, is that correct?
Yes.
How much money are you gonna have left in that account when you spend that?
So I don't have that information in front of me, but I'm happy to send out an email with a follow-up to that. But I do feel safe using the amount that I put in here. But I can get back to you. I don't have it
Can you
on.
give me an order of magnitude?
So we have about 2 million or so in our E&D now, and it was a slight overage because of the 150. So we have to use that 150, which will reduce your assessments, and then we have a total of it's 1,080,000. So we'll still have plenty in the E&D to support the next year's operating budget. And
Well-
anything excess, so if we receive more in transportation reimbursement, or we receive more than what's budgeted in Medicaid or charter, or more than what's in our interest revenue, that will also roll into our E&D.
Okay, I didn't follow all of that. You have now 1.8 million?
Yes.
And you're gonna spend 1.2 million?
We have 2 million.
We have 2 million and you're gonna spend 1.2.
We're gonna spend, well, we have 2 million plus 150,000. So take the 150,000 that we're giving out, just call it 2 million for simple math.
All right.
We're going to spend 1.2, or not 1.2, 1,080,000. And then so say we have $1 million left. We have a contingency of 280,000 in here that we don't plan to spend, but it's there in case of emergency. So then we would have $1 million. If we don't need to spend it, that's 280,000. That's 1.2 million. And anything extra that we receive in revenue that is not the actual dollar amount budgeted, that will also roll into E&D.
Okay, so it sounds like you'll have enough money to spend this 1.21 something
Yes.
million. And you'll have enough to spend something like that next year. What happens after that?
Well, we'll be able to, if we need to make adjustments, we can based on what we're foreseeing, but it all depends. I mean, it's really, I have been told by very seasoned business officials, it's really impossible to know, to be able to project out 5 years of where you're going to be because there's so many changes.
Yeah, but it does, I agree, you can't project 5 years in advance. But it does seem like the best projection we can make is that 2 years from now, we're gonna have to come up with another $800,000.
I don't know if I would say that, because so if we have, right now at the end of the year, if, like I said, if we had 2 million minus the 1,080,000, that's $1 million. If we don't use our contingency of 280, that's in there and anything extra rolls in. Same thing that happens next year. If we have, so if our balance then is, I don't know, it'd be the same scenario per se. That we would still have our contingency that would roll in if we don't use it, which we, since I've been working for the district, we have not used. So I don't think that we're going to have an issue in FY28 with this. But I think we can move on to the next question.
Shannon, can I add to that?
Yes.
So the regions always use somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 to support the budget, going back decades. So it's not I don't think this number is unusual. And given that they're at the 5% cap, using a little bit more makes sense because they're kind of right up against it. So every year they're going to give money back to the towns if they don't spend that balance down a little bit. So I don't think the number is, it's not something they can adjust in future years if they need to. My name's Sean. So I'm Sean Nagano, Finance Director for the town of Amherst, but I was the Regional Business Manager for a while. Just reiterating what Shannon said, on the expense side too, if they come under budget on the expenses, that also flows into E&D. So if you think about a $40 million budget, if they come under 1%, that's $400,000 going back to E&D every year. So it's manageable.
Sean hired me in 2019.
Were there any other clarifying questions? Sorry.
Hi, Joe Jane, Finance Committee, Amherst. Just a quick one. On the central administration cost, that increase that's forecasted, you list a few components on there like legal expenses and financial advisory expenses. Can you talk about, is one of those components more than the other in making up that cost?
I'd say most of the costs are for legal expenses.
Legal expenses. And that's because?
That's because, and we clarified, it's not just staff issues, but also student issues. Over the recent series of years, and I'm glad that Shannon went back 3 years, we've had an increase in issues in the region that we've been addressing. And so as we've done that, we've had different levels of legal cases, some which we are closing, some which we are still in the process of. And that is not just, again, for staff, but also in reference to student things that we need to close.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good.
Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Shane. I'm on the Amherst Council and have been on the Finance Committee. But as Mandy said, we're reorganizing, so we'll let you know after Monday night where I'll be. I have two questions, Shannon. There's a big jump that you're projecting for interest in terms of revenues, well above what it was the year before. Are you running high in FY26 also? So,
Yes.
so that's a good news for the FY26 budget, correct?
Yes. Yep, we are running higher we did account for a slight change because I wish I had this graph up, but when I sent the memo to the regional school committee, I put what we received in interest revenue since I think it was 2017. And at the time when this budget was built, we didn't see that, we didn't know how much we were gotten. That's when the real big amount came. So we're running high. I still foresee this. And actually this is a slightly lower than what we could have put, just in case.
Okay, I mean, I think that's good news for the current year that we're living in, so I just wanted to do. Then the second is on your original expense projections on the salary line, you had nearly 7%. Could you describe what's underneath that? Because I know there's steps in COLA, but is it just steps in COLA, or are there people increases underneath that 7%? And I know it doesn't have pension, it doesn't have health insurance in it, so it's just the salary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so majority is steps and COLAs. There are some additional placements, like during this year, the moment we started off, we had already eaten into our contingency based on some of the needs of the students that we had to hire additional positions for. So knowing that that was going, we'll still have that student and that need is still there, it is added into the FY27 budget, so that is part of the increase as well.
So the last part is there are some people in it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jed Prujansky, Selectman from Leverett. Looking at the draft operating budget, from Leverett's point of view, we have asked all departments to come in with a no more than a 3.5% increase in the budget line, and that comes close in your reduction of $2,060,000. But the question that I have is on all of those steps of the reduction, what is the impact on the services and programs that we run? So we have to know that to balance the reduction with the pain involved in that reduction, so we can come to a point that makes sense. So I would ask, not at this meeting obviously, but going forward when you re-present the budget, to have with each of those reductions the impact to education in the district.
So I just want to chime in and say I think that we know that this is early in the year, and there's a couple things. There's 2 slides that you can start to have that conversation with. The first one is the region staffing composition, and then the second one is in perspective, where Shannon lays out what the FTEs may be, and we project it by salary. So the thought process is the central office we can say is about 30 FTE. but that's split across 3 districts. And so for the region, it's 54%. So even if you erase the entire central office, we would still be cutting teachers. In high school, our guidance department is about 16.8 FTEs. So if we were to lose our entire guidance office, we still, to meet a 2.1, I'll estimate 2.1 reduction, we'll still be erasing. We'll be at 29 FTEs. So I think to start the conversation around where the towns could go, that's why we put that in perspective section there. And then when we come back and we're kind of delving deeper into the budget, we'll have more specifics around the impact of programming.
Great, thank you all. Okay, so 2 more comments, and then as per usual, we want to give our towns and committees an opportunity to have some discussion. And we do know that Shutesbury has to skedaddle. So we'll have, I think I said 2 more hands, and then we'll have our breakout groups for about 10-15 minutes, and then if there's follow-up, we can come back together and then go enjoy Shutesbury's new library.
Lenny Reesbury, Amherst Town Council. I was very interested to see that you had discussed the possibility of providing some guidelines to the superintendent as you move forward with your budget. And let me just assume that we would all say students first.
Everyone didn't hear Lynn's comment, and she said she was very happy to hear the RSC discuss the possibility of providing budgetary guidelines to administration, and she would like to say students first. That's a good summary.
Yeah, and a question about the interest revenue that we've already touched on, but when you talked about the capital stabilization account, it sounded like interest was staying in there. Is this, so in the revenue, is this interest from some other funds, or is this being transferred in from capital?
No, so they're completely separate. So capital's interest on that borrowed money goes into the capital stabilization. Is not a part of the interest revenue on here. So this is all of our other cash on hand.
Great, thank you all very much. So let's say if we can come back at 9:10, gives us 15 quick minutes, and then we will go from there. Thank you all.
You may need to walk with your chairs because we brought all the chairs forward.
Also true.
So please know that if wherever you plan to caucus, you may need to take your table and your chair.
Thank you very much. I hope you had a good conversation in your breakout groups. If there are some follow-up questions or comments or things we should know moving forward, we will have another opportunity to come together. I want to first appreciate the collaborative process that has happened this budget season. I think it's great. We're all having hard budget days, but this feels a lot better than previous years, even though we're having really hard conversations. So I wanted to say thank you. And Dr. Z, you had, all right.
I don't often, we speak publicly all the time, but I do want to start off by saying we got some really good feedback, Shannon and I, as we were walking around about today in the presentation. And I know as a district team, we work very hard on things, but we really also have to give much appreciation to our regional school committee members. We built the presentation off of their guidance, but also their feedback. And so a lot of what you were able to experience today as a town came because the regional school committee members who sit on the regional school committee take your input and your comments into deep consideration. And so we as an administration want to say thank you to our budget and audit subcommittee members, to our whole entire regional school committee for just your guidance and pushing. And I feel like the towns felt like today was a really good opportunity to delve into a good conversation around where we could go. So thank you to our school committee members.
Okay. You know, you'd think after all this microphone is, I would hate them less, but that's not true. So before we break for the end of today, are there there any questions or feedback we would like to? All right, we'll start over here and just go this way.
And can you please identify your town? I'm taking notes.
Phil Carter, Leverett Finance Committee. I just want to let the school committee and the superintendent's office realize that in Leverett, the average tax bill went up by more than $500 this year. It's a huge increase. And a large part of the reason for that was our regional school assessment went up by 14% this year. I don't think it's reasonable to ask the town meeting. Given that, I don't think I can ask the town meeting to approve an 11 or 12% increase in our assessment this year. I think that's just out of the question. And I do want everybody to realize also that when you're talking about a $2 million cut in the level services budget, that what you are talking about is still a 4% increase in the school budget. So it really isn't a $2 million cut. It is a 4% increase. It may not be enough to maintain level services, but it is a 4% increase in the school budget.
Pelham is in an interesting predicament. It's much like Leverett was in years ago when you were looking to handle the Kittredge Estate reassessment. You thought you were going to have to come up with a lot of money because the assessment would go down. And you were looking at reducing budgets at that time, at least comparing numbers to see what you have to do. Pelham at this situation, I've been telling you, everybody all along, the increase is 2.5%. And this year, 2.5% is $135,000 for the whole town. That is $4,000 more than last year. So the incremental change annually for Pelham is very small. So when you look at asking in the original budget of about $200,000 alone for the regional school, that's nothing for the town left to spend. So to deal with whatever number we come up with is going to come from the town support for the elementary school. That's the only place there is any kind of volume money available. We could go, I guess, the DPW is already going down from 4 people to 3 people. That's already been put in place. There's just no money. And the increases you're looking for are just not sustainable for a town like Pelham. Now, you talk about your taxes going up by $500. The annual the average in Pelham went up by $1,000 this year. So our taxpayers are already reeling under a major, and that was largely to fall in line with the statutory requirement for the regional school. So we're not only facing a $1,000 increase for the taxpayers this year, we'll be looking at a major override next year to carry us through a number of years in the future until adjustments can be made by the retirement being fully funded, OPEB being fully funded, which will reduce some of the tax burden. But for right now, this increase is 2.5%.
Thank you, John. Any comments from Amherst? Will Shrewsbury go first? Sure. Shrewsbury. Thank you.
Oh, darn, I thought you were going to go first. First of all, I want to, on behalf of the town, we want to thank everybody for... Shrewsbury, I'm sorry, Rita Farrell. I'm on the Shrewsbury Select Board. We want to thank all of you for changing your schedules to meet at 8 o'clock. So, as has been mentioned, 10 o'clock, we have the grand opening for our beautiful new library. It's very exciting. We're thrilled to finally be here after decades of trying to get a library that had a bathroom in it. So, I think we can echo exactly what you've heard from Pelham and Leverett. We too have experienced a significant jump, approximately 10% in our average tax bill this year, and anticipate, given expenses, including the library coming on board, of another 10% next year. And we're hearing a lot from people who are on fixed incomes that this is unsustainable. So just briefly, the proposed level services budget would result in a 10% increase for us. The Select Board and the Finance Committee met earlier this week and agreed that this level of increase is not fiscally responsible or sustainable for Shutesbury, given the broader pressures of health insurance, our elementary school budget, which has a out-of-district placement, which is a huge hit on our budget. We have the library debt service, and we're trying to keep up with our OPEB contributions. So, again, we say to the regional schools, we support you. We think education is a very high priority, but level funded budget is just not workable for us.
Thank you. Amherst.
Thank you. I will try. I think I'm going to echo a lot of what you just heard from the other three towns. It's no surprise the last council before we reorganized put out a budget guideline of 3.5% per major funding area. That remains the guidelines for now, pending new information that comes in February, but that was a budget that had deficits already and needed increased in revenue to even fund the 3.5%. And the Finance Committee was concerned that given uncertainty about state revenues, it might not get there. And so, we have all the same challenges as everyone else, and what was presented as a level services budget would basically subsume the entire increase, as like Pelham said, of our entire revenues for all of the all revenues, which is about projected at $2.6 million for the entire town. We had a good conversation, and I'll try and be quick about some of the summaries there. Some information and how soon can we get an idea of the impacts of the various budget levels when including benefits in the every FTE reduction. There was a request from a school committee member, and similar to what the track conversations are about assisting in track maintenance, of is there a possibility for town to assist in grant applications for capital programs given capacity at the region. So I will forward that on to our manager to see if that's something that he can pursue if the region would like to pursue that. We would like to continue conversations on how to minimize the damage, because we do recognize that a 4% increase in the total budget that matches our guidelines will have damage, and how do we work as towns to minimize that? And the town's already looking at making its own reductions given that too, so it's all across. And one other thing is, how do we as four towns and a region sort of meet this challenge long term? What bigger changes can we do that would, or changes to reduce costs that would have a big impact on budgets and finances across big things? And I will throw out two that just come to mind as maybe it's time to begin conversations on. One was mentioned by the superintendent last year, is moving middle school to the high school. I don't know, again, mentioning, not proposing at this time, but another one that comes to mind is it time to consider a larger regionalization effort amongst the 4 towns? Those are the 2 that easily come to mind. There's probably others to better or have bigger impacts on budgetary issues going forward.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. I think we...
Quick question.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm out of place, sorry. If I'm out of place, I apologize. You mentioned regionalization, like expanding, and I think we have to look at that. Where did this conversation start? Did they start with the region? Did they start with the towns? Like, in my mind, Hadley, South Hadley, East Hampton, if we could grab those towns, then we could have a real, I shouldn't say grab those towns, because we have to all. I feel like that no offense to Dr. Z, I don't think we're all that as a district, okay? So I think we may have to tuck our tails down and say, hey, can we join other areas? So I shouldn't say grab them, because I think it has to be cooperative and new, but like, where do those conversations start, and how do we talk to Hadley, South Hadley, and East Hampton to really see, like, you know, we could have a school in East Hampton and we could have a high school here. Like, how could we talk about how that would impact our long-term survival ability?
Nancy Grossman, Leverett Finance Committee, and I think we desperately need to expand this conversation to the state level, that we've been put in an absolutely no-win situation where people who are tasked with keeping our towns affordable so that we're not losing residents who can no longer pay our tax bills are placed in an unfair opposition to those whose concerns for the school budgets are a little stronger than the tax bill concerns, and that is not a fair argument. And absolutely, the state is not taxing our wealthiest residents enough, sending enough money back to cities and towns so that we don't go through this year after year after year after year. And the more we just fight here, and if I never hear those who don't support these higher budgets don't care about students, if I never hear that again, I will be a very happy woman. But because that is not a fair argument. But I'm wondering, Mindy, if you're still here, if you're able to speak a little bit about what we might be moving forward on the state level. Is that okay?
Yep. I'll be extremely brief. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I don't have anything to report at this time. We're waiting to see what the governor's budget comes out with. A lot of us have been, as many of you have been advocating with the governor's staff and the governor herself to make sure that she includes adequate levels of funding in her budget, since that's where the conversation starts. There will be, and I just want to kind of flag it for you, there'll be Ways and Means hearings on her budget. I encourage every town to show up. Amherst, I know, has in the past. The school committee has. Show up as a parent, show up as a school committee member, a town official, and talk about what's needed, because that's where you'll be able to tell reps and senators how deficient her budget is, or what should be kept in her budget. But I can't really project, and of course, we'll see what happens with, quite frankly, at the federal level, what happens with the ACA tax credits ultimately, because without those, the budget will be, in Massachusetts, everything in the budget will be in flux, to be able to comment. I'm sorry, I can't give you more.
I just want to ask you how to get my note. They'll be posted, and you can also be in touch with me or Senator Comerford, and you can let me know when that happens.
I want to go back to the question that you raised, and that is, I think we have to start with our 4 towns. We have a good start. There's been a group of us that have been meeting and are more than willing to continue. Most of that's been around budgets, but it's time to carry it to a long-term future. And then in that group, begin to say whether or not we think we want to look at other towns as well. But this is not the first time that conversation is taking place, but it's the first time that conversation would be taking place since the town council was formed in Amherst.
Thank you. Okay. Sarah, last comment.
Yeah.
Clarifying question, actually. Is that group that's having those discussions the one you're talking about where you're asking for towns to send delegates? I don't want to have too many committees having too many discussions. Like, let's coordinate this. There's some, you are asking for representatives, including school committee, to a committee that is going to talk, I gather, about long-term sustainability. That sounds like the conversation that wins.
I think we clarified the last time when we had the disconnect at the RSC that we were going to hand that work over to FSS. That's why FSS started the conversation. Oh, sorry, Bridget.
That's, well, it's more, official coming from Dr. Z, but that's exactly. We started off this meeting requesting that we have representatives to the FSS because we've already been working on, okay, what are those subcommittee areas? Is one of them regionalization? Is one of them related to operating and all those pieces to figure out, mainly, at the end of the day, how do we make these cuts the least impactful on students by making some more structural changes. So we want to have those discussions. Hopefully Monday night Amherst will give us their rep and we can go forward.
I think we are all set for today, so thank you all very much for coming and our continued collaboration. And what? Absolutely, we can Yes, so, and thank you all very much for coming, and we are officially adjourned. Thank you.